Usually when we think about running an errand, there's this expectation of simple geometry.
Right, like drawing a completely straight line.
Exactly. You realize you need milk. You walk through those automatic sliding doors of the supermarket. You navigate directly to the dairy aisle, and you grab the carton with the blue cap.
Yeah, you walk to the register, pay, and walk out.
Point A to point B.
And it feels completely rational, doesn't it? I mean, it's comforting to believe that we are the absolute, undisputed authors of our own decisions, especially when it comes to spending our own hard-earned money.
But then you actually stop and look a little closer. You look at the architecture of that supermarket or, the specific way ads flow on your social media feed, or even just the subtle curves on the packaging of that milk carton.
Yeah.
And suddenly that straight line starts to look like a wildly complex, deliberately engineered maze.
Oh, absolutely.
We're operating in a psychological landscape that is entirely invisible, but it is steering us at every single turn.
It really is the absolute definition of a curated reality. Every single element you interact with, from the lighting in the store to the font on a price tag, has been engineered by someone, somewhere, to speak directly to your subconscious mind.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a massive, comprehensive piece of source material. It's a BSc psychology textbook on consumer behavior from Alabama University.
Right, and it is a heavy textbook.
It is, but we are translating its densest secrets into a map of your own mind. Our mission is to completely decode the invisible psychological forces that dictate why you buy what you buy.
And don't worry, we are entirely bypassing the dense academic jargon.
Definitely. Our goal is to extract the fascinating real-world aha moments. We want to figure out how marketing evolved from just, producing goods in a factory to literally mapping human desire.
It's a huge shift.
Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered why you walk into a store for one single thing, like that carton of milk, and you leave with 5 different items, feeling perfectly justified, even happy about it?
It is the ultimate question of modern commerce. And to answer it, we have to start by dismantling a very persistent illusion.
Which is?
We have to recognize that the act of buying is rarely a solo mission.
Oh, right.
Even if you are the only person standing at the cash register physically scanning your credit card, there is an entire cast of characters involved in that transaction.
I love how the researchers frame this, because before we can understand why you buy, we have to understand how the act of buying actually happens structurally.
Yeah, the mechanics of it?
Right, and they identify 6 distinct consumer roles. It's like a play being put on in your head and in your home, and you might be playing multiple parts, or you might be playing one.
Exactly.
Let's walk through them. First, you have the initiator.
The initiator is the spark. This is the person who first recognizes the unfulfilled need or want.
Like realizing the fridge is empty.
Right. They are the one who starts the entire domino effect by simply saying, hey, we are out of make, or I really want a new car. Without the initiator, there is no journey.
Right, but they don't necessarily make the purchase. Because right after the initiator, you have the influencer.
The influencer is the whisperer. This role is fascinating because they don't necessarily have the final say, and they aren't paying, but they gather the information.
They sway the jury, basically.
Exactly. They strategically try to impose their own criteria on the decision.
Next up is the payer, the person with the actual financial authority, the wallet.
The one who actually feels the pain of the purchase.
Yeah. Then the decider, the one who makes the ultimate choice of exactly what brand, what model, and what time to buy.
And that leads to the buyer, which is strictly the person who conducts the physical transaction.
The one visiting the store and handing over the money.
Right. And finally, the user, the person who actually consumes the product.
To ground this in reality, let's look at the example from the textbook of a teenager who wants to buy a motorcycle for commuting to college. It perfectly illustrates how messy this gets.
Oh, it's a great example.
Yeah.
Because it starts long before they even get to the dealership.
Walk us through that Saturday at the dealership.
Well, the teenager is the initiator. He feels the need for the bike. He brings it up at the dinner table.
So the spark is lit.
Right. But immediately, the influencers enter the picture. His friends at school are telling him which brand is the coolest, maybe pushing him toward a high-performance sports bike.
But his parents are also influencers.
Exactly. They are sitting at that dinner table pointing out anti-lock brakes, safety ratings, and fuel efficiency.
And here is where the power dynamics shift dramatically. Because the teenager is absolutely going to be the user. But he is likely not the payer.
Right.
If the father or mother is the payer, handing over the cash, they suddenly have a massive amount of leverage.
Precisely. If the dad is paying, the teenager is heavily obligated to listen to his safety suggestions. The father might ultimately act as the decider.
Making the final, non-negotiable call on which specific model is purchased.
Yeah. And yet, on Saturday, the teenager might be the one who physically goes to the dealership, acts as the buyer, signs the registration paperwork, and drives it off the lot.
There's another example that happens in millions of homes every day, and that's buying a family refrigerator.
Oh, the fridge is a classic battleground.
Right. The wife might notice the old one is leaking and act as the initiator. She and her friends might be influencers regarding the brand or, wanting that French door style.
The husband might be the payer.
But the wife might be the decider and the primary user.
And what's crucial for a marketer to understand here is the trap of the buyer.
What do you mean?
Well, if a company only surveys the person swiping the credit card at the appliance store, they are missing the entire ecosystem of the decision.
Wow, yeah.
They miss the friends, the spouse, the kids who influence the layout of the snack drawer.
So buying a family fridge isn't just a simple transaction. It's practically a boardroom negotiation with different stakeholders.
It really is.
But hold on, this brings up something that has always bothered me about traditional economics. Traditional economic theory always assumes we are these perfectly rational economic machines.
The myth of the rational consumer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we calculate maximum utility, we weigh every option logically, we look at the price of raw materials, and we make the perfect mathematical choice.
Which is completely absurd.
Right, because this boardroom negotiation over a fridge sounds incredibly messy and emotional. Is that rational machine idea actually true in practice?
What's fascinating here is that modern social scientists entirely reject the idea of the perfectly rational economic machine.
They just throw it out.
Completely. We operate in a highly imperfect world. We do not sit around calculating marginal utility or plotting supply and demand curves in our heads when we are staring at a wall of refrigerators.
I mean, that sounds exhausting.
It is. Most of the time, we are unwilling and simply unable to engage in extensive, exhausting decision-making activities for every purchase. Instead, we engage in what's called satisficing.
Satisficing.
Yeah, we settle for a satisfactory decision, not the mathematically perfect one,
Right.
because we are driven by complex social and psychological pressures.
So you're saying consumer behavior isn't just economics?
Not at all. It is a deeply interdisciplinary science. Yes, it borrows from economics for the concepts of income and purchasing power. I mean, you can't buy what you can't afford.
Right.
But it borrows heavily from sociology to understand group dynamics, social class, and how we negotiate with that boardroom of family members.
And cultural anthropology, too.
Right, exactly. To understand the inherited beliefs and values passed down through generations that dictate what we consider valuable in the first place.
And, of course, it relies on psychology to understand individual needs, motivation, and perception.
Which perfectly explains the historical shift in corporate strategy.
Let's talk about that shift, because in the past, traditional companies were what the textbook calls internally driven.
Yes, they followed the production concept.
Right, the idea of we have a factory, it's convenient for us to make standard black Model T Fords, so we'll make them, put them on the lot, and assume people will buy them based on price and basic functionality.
They resisted change. The internally driven model was, honestly, kind of arrogant.
Build it and they will come.
Exactly. It assumed the product was inherently superior and the consumer would just adapt. But successful modern companies are market-driven.
Meaning they work backward from the customer.
Yes. They realize the customer's deeply complex interdisciplinary needs must dictate the entire corporate strategy.
So they do the research first.
Right. They do the sociological and psychological research first, figure out this messy web of behavior, and then build the factory and the product around serving that specific need.
But because human decisions are so incredibly complex and so varied based on all those sociological and psychological factors, a company quickly realizes one very hard truth.
Which is?
You can't just make a car or a fridge anymore.
No, you cannot, because you cannot possibly please everyone. If you try to build a product designed to satisfy every single person on Earth, you end up with a compromised, watered-down product that satisfies absolutely no one completely.
And that reality is what forces marketers to start slicing up the crowd.
Yeah, market segmentation.
Because human decisions are so incredibly varied, the company has to slice up the population to find you. They have to find their specific target market.
Segmentation is the process of dividing a massive, heterogeneous market into smaller, more similar submarkets.
And make it manageable.
Exactly. The goal is to find groups of customers who have highly similar requirements so you can serve them perfectly rather than serving the whole world adequately.
There are four main ways marketers slice us up. Let's go through them because it gets progressively more invasive.
Okay, let's do it.
First is geographic. That's pretty straightforward. Where do you live? Urban versus rural, different climates, different
It's
regions.
the most basic slice.
Right. People living in the snowy mountains of Colorado need different tires, different coats, and different heating systems than people living in the desert of Arizona.
Next is demographic. Age, gender, income, education, stage of the family life cycle.
The classic census stuff.
Yeah. Demographics are historically the most common because they are the easiest to measure. You can look at data and find out exactly how many married 30-year-olds making $75,000 live in a specific zip code.
But demographic data has massive flaws.
Huge flaws, because demographic data only tells you the outline of a person, not what's inside.
Give me an example.
Well, you could have two 30-year-old men earning the exact same income, living in the exact same apartment building with the exact same education level.
Okay.
Demographically, they are identical twins.
Mm.
But one might spend every disposable dollar she has on high-end gaming equipment and energy drinks.
And the other?
The other spends his money on organic gardening supplies and classical music finals.
So if you target them both with the exact same ad just because they are 30-year-old men making $75K, you are completely wasting your money.
Exactly. Which is why the third type of segmentation was developed, and it is critical: psychographic segmentation.
Psychographics.
This is where marketers stop looking at your census data and start looking at your lifestyle and personality.
To do this, the research says they use something called the AIO framework to map your lifestyle.
Yes. AIO stands for activities, interests, and opinions.
So what are your hobbies? What social issues do you care about? Are you politically conservative or liberal? What do you do on a Friday night?
Psychographics goes far beyond the surface. When marketers conduct psychographic research, they use incredibly long, detailed surveys with lists of statements asking you to agree or disagree.
They want to capture the inner architecture of a consumer.
Right. They want to know if you are a risk taker. Are you deeply traditional? Are you an achiever who believes in playing hard and working hard?
Or do you prefer like a belonging lifestyle focused on quiet family time and community service?
Exactly. Now, the fourth slice is behavioral segmentation.
And this one completely ignores who you are on paper.
It looks strictly at how you interact with the product itself.
Right. Are you a heavy user or a light user? Are you fiercely brand loyal? Or do you switch brands constantly the second you see a discount?
What specific benefit are you seeking from the product? That's behavioral.
And the magic happens when marketers layer these slices. They don't just use one.
Never. They want to find the heavy user of coffee, which is behavioral.
Who is also a fast-paced, upwardly mobile achiever, which is psychographic.
Living in a major metropolitan downtown, geographic.
Between the ages of 25 and 40, demographic.
When you layer those four filters, you go from shooting in the dark to using a highly precise laser.
Let's look at a brilliant, real-world example from the text of how a company tailors its approach based on these segments.
The cosmetics brand.
Yes, there's an Indian cosmetics brand called Lakme. They don't just throw their makeup into every single store across the country in the exact same way.
No, that would be inefficient.
They use 3 distinct distribution channels tailored to 3 totally different segments.
It's a masterful retail strategy because you have to think about the feeling of where you buy something.
Right.
For the everyday practical segment, people who just need basic skincare products like daily moisturizers, Lakme places those specific items in small, local neighborhood shops.
Because that segment values convenience above all else. They just want to grab it and go.
Exactly. But for the broader, more involved segment, consumers who enjoy taking their time, comparing shades, and looking at the whole range of personal care products, they place those in larger central marketplaces and department stores.
And then for the elite, high-income, highly invested segment, the ones who view cosmetics not as a chore, but as an experience.
For them, Lakme operates exclusive branded salons. These salons stock premium, exclusive cosmetics you can't get in the neighborhood shop, and they offer personalized grooming services.
But it's the exact same parent brand.
Exactly. It's the same brand, but completely different physical delivery methods based entirely on the psychological and behavioral segment they are targeting.
This highlights a really fascinating distinction between product differentiation and promotional differentiation.
Product differentiation is when you actually change the physical features of the item to appeal to a segment.
Like adding a better camera to a smartphone.
Right. Or you re-engineer a car engine to be more fuel efficient. The physical reality of the object changes?
But sometimes changing the physical reality means taking things away, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Think about Nokia. The text mentions that years ago, they released a stripped-down, incredibly basic mobile phone specifically for entry-level customers.
Yes, instead of adding cameras, internet browsers, and games, they did the research.
And they realized a huge segment of older or less tech-savvy people were completely overwhelmed by complex features. They just wanted a plastic brick that made phone calls.
So deleting features was their product differentiation.
Yes, sometimes less is more if it perfectly aligns with the target segment's needs.
On the other hand, you have promotional differentiation,
This is when the physical product stays exactly the same.
down to the last molecule. But the image created around it changes.
You use different advertising, different celebrity endorsements, and different emotional appeals to make the exact same product appeal to a totally different psychographic segment.
And once you find your segment and you figure out your differentiation, you have to plant your flag in the consumer's brain.
Which was called positioning.
Right. And there are 4 criteria for successful positioning. The 4 C's.
Clarity, consistency, credibility, and competitiveness.
Clarity means your value proposition must be unmistakable. The consumer needs to know exactly what you stand for in 3 seconds.
Okay, what about consistency?
You cannot change your brand's identity every 6 months. If you are the reliable, safe brand today, you can't be the edgy, dangerous brand tomorrow, or the consumer's brain simply rejects the confusion.
Credibility means you actually have to deliver on the promise you make.
Yeah, if you position yourself as a luxury brand, the zipper on your jacket better not break on day 1.
And finally, competitiveness means you have to offer an angle that your rivals simply do not have.
Because if you mess any of those up, you have to execute a repositioning strategy.
Which sounds expensive.
It is. You have to spend millions trying to change the image of the product or tweak the physical product or pivot entirely and try to pitch the same product to a new target market.
But I want to pause here because I have to push back on this whole psychographic profiling thing.
Okay, lay it on me.
When we talk about targeting these lifestyles, isn't psychographic segmentation just a fancy academic term for corporate stereotyping?
How do you mean?
I mean, look at some of the ads mentioned in the research, these young, upwardly mobile lifestyle ads. There is an ad for pantaloon cotton trousers that talks about the heady feeling of being successful.
Right.
Or Bewara underwear ads boasting about the grand fashion avenues of Paris. I mean, really, underwear that makes you feel like you're in Paris.
It does sound a bit much.
Do these ads reflect any actual reality? Or are they just selling a hollow, aspirational fantasy to people who are stuck in cubicles?
That is a very sharp, very valid pushback. The short answer is it's an aspirational fantasy, but it is not merely stereotyping.
Okay, what's the difference?
The distinction is vital. A stereotype reduces a complex person to a single, often entirely inaccurate or insulting trait based on assumptions.
Right.
Psychographic lifestyle analysis, however, attempts to paint a picture of the whole person interacting with their environment.
So they aren't just guessing.
No. When a brand like Pantaloon or Bilwara uses those dramatic aspirational appeals, they're doing so because their AIO research.
The activities, interests, and opinions.
Right. Their deep dive revealed that this specific group of people deeply, intensely values the concept of success, global connectivity, and freedom.
So the ad might present an idealized, almost ridiculous fantasy version of that life.
Exactly. The ad is a fantasy. But the values the ad targets are entirely real and central to the consumer's self-concept.
So the consumer in the cubicle knows the trousers won't magically transport them to Paris.
They aren't stupid. But buying the trousers aligns their external reality with their internal aspirational identity. It's about aligning the brand with the consumer's central life interests.
It's not saying this is who you are right now. It's saying this is the feeling you value most, and our product is a bridge to that feeling.
Perfectly said.
Which takes us right into our next major area, the engine of desire.
Because once a marketer has found your segment and they've built the right product, and they've positioned it with the right fantasy, they still have to figure out what actually drives you to physically get off the couch.
Pull out your credit card and make the purchase.
They have to tap into your motivations and your deep-seated personality. Motivation is the driving force within individuals that impels them to action.
And this force is produced by a state of tension.
Yes.
I love that phrasing. State of tension. It sounds almost uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable. When you have an unfulfilled need, it creates psychological or physiological tension. Your brain doesn't like tension, so you act to reduce it. That action is your behavior.
The science distinguishes between two fundamental types of needs that cause this tension. First, you have innate needs.
These are biogenic, things we are born needing to survive.
Food, water, air, shelter, clothing to keep us warm.
And then you have acquired needs.
Psychogenic needs. Needs we develop after birth through our culture, our parents, and our environment.
Things like the need for esteem, affection, prestige, or power.
To organize this chaos of human desire, marketers rely heavily on one of the most famous psychological frameworks ever created, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Abraham Maslow proposed that human needs operate on 5 distinct levels, like a pyramid.
At the wide bottom base are your physiological needs.
The innate stuff, food and water. You must fulfill these first.
Next up are safety needs.
Physical security, order, control over your environment, a lock on your door.
Then social needs.
Love, affection, a sense of belonging to a tribe.
Then egoistic needs.
Which can be inward-oriented, like self-esteem and independence, or outward-oriented, like prestige and status among your peers.
And finally, at the very peak of the pyramid,
Self-actualization, the desire to reach your full, unique potential as a human being.
to understand how powerful this is, let's look at a brilliant, simple example from the text, buying food at a restaurant. Now, food is at the very bottom of the pyramid. It's a physiological need.
Right. If you are starving on a road trip, you pull into a brightly lit fast food drive-thru, you are fulfilling that basic need.
The marketer for that fast food joint focuses entirely on speed, convenience, and a low price. They know your tension is purely physiological hunger.
But what happens when you book a table months in advance at a 5-star exclusive luxury hotel restaurant?
Right, you aren't just buying calories to survive. You probably aren't even that hungry when you sit down. You're fulfilling egoistic and status needs.
Exactly. The marketer for that luxury restaurant doesn't advertise the calorie count or how fast the food comes out.
They focus on the exclusivity, the dim, moody ambiance, the prestige of the chef.
It's the exact same fundamental product, a meal, but it is positioned for an entirely different level of Maslow's hierarchy.
And beyond Maslow, there is another framework called the trio of needs theory. This suggests 3 fundamental drives that dominate our acquired needs: power, affiliation, and achievement.
Let's break those down. Power is the desire to control your environment and control other people.
Affiliation is the deep, warm desire for friendship, acceptance, and belonging.
And achievement is the drive for personal accomplishment, taking calculated risks and seeking feedback to prove you are competent.
Marketers map their products directly onto these specific needs. A luxury sports car with a roaring engine appeals directly to power and achievement.
While a family board game or a social media platform appeals entirely to affiliation.
But here's the catch. How a person expresses these needs and whether they choose the sports car or the board game depends entirely on their individual personality.
And this is where we have to bring in the heavy hitters of psychology. You cannot talk about personality without bringing in Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory.
Good old Freud.
Freud argued that human behavior is driven largely by unconscious needs and biological drives that we aren't even aware of. He divided the human psyche into 3 distinct parts: the id, the ego, and the superego.
It helps to think of Freud's model like a car hurtling down a highway. The id is the engine running incredibly hot.
It is the warehouse of primitive, impulsive drives. It operates on the pleasure principle. It wants immediate, unrestrained satisfaction.
It says, I want that massive slice of chocolate cake right now, and I don't care if I get a stomachache or gain weight.
Then you have the superego. The superego is the brakes on that car. It is the internal expression of society's moral and ethical codes.
It's the voice of your parents and your teachers. It says you absolutely shouldn't eat that cake. It's unhealthy, it's indulgent, and you should be disciplined.
And finally, the ego. The ego is the terrified, exhausted driver trying to steer the car.
It's your conscious control.
Right. It's the mediator trying to balance the screaming, impulsive demands of the id with the strict punishing rules of the superego. The ego tries to find a socially acceptable way to satisfy the id.
Maybe it says, okay, we will have a small piece of dark chocolate after we go for a run.
Exactly. Now, there was a researcher named Dr. Ernest Dichter who took Freud's theories and applied them directly to consumer behavior in what became known as motivational research.
Dichter believed that because our drives are mostly unconscious, if you just hand a consumer a clipboard and ask them why they bought a specific car, they will give you a rational, logical answer.
They will talk about fuel efficiency or trunk space. That is the ego talking. The ego wants to sound smart.
But Dichter didn't care about the ego. He wanted to uncover the hidden subconscious desires, the id.
So he used qualitative research, mainly in-depth, hours-long psychoanalytic interviews, to find out what products really symbolize to people deep down in their subconscious.
And he found some wild stuff. He found that baking a cake wasn't just about making dessert. For many women at the time, it subconsciously represented the act of giving birth and nurturing.
And he found that men didn't buy convertibles for the wind in their hair. They bought them as a subconscious substitute for a mistress.
It sounds wild, but it completely revolutionized advertising. Advertisers stopped selling the literal features of a product and started selling the subconscious emotional release.
While Freudian theory focuses on the deep, messy subconscious, modern consumer research also heavily emphasizes trait theory.
Trait theory is a bit different, right?
Yeah, it departs from the idea of hidden unconscious struggles and instead argues that human personality is made up of measurable, inherent psychological traits that can be quantified on a test.
And there are a few fascinating traits that marketers actively measure. One is dogmatism.
Highly dogmatic people are rigid. They prefer established authority and tradition. They feel anxious when things change too fast.
Marketers know that highly dogmatic people respond incredibly well to ads featuring doctors, experts, or strong authority figures telling them exactly what to do.
On the flip side, low dogmatic people are open-minded. They love the new and unknown. They are your early adopters who will buy a weird new tech gadget just to see how it works.
Then there is consumer ethnocentrism. Highly ethnocentric consumers feel it is morally wrong to buy foreign-made products. They feel it hurts the domestic economy and betrays their country.
Marketers appeal to them with strong nationalistic themes, flags, and Made in the USA or Made in India labels.
Another really interesting distinction is between inner-directed and other-directed consumers.
Inner-directed consumers evaluate products based on their own internal, personal values and standards. They don't care much about what's trending on TikTok.
Other-directed consumers, however, constantly look to their social environment for direction. They desperately want to fit in.
They respond powerfully to advertisements that show social acceptance and peer approval. Ads where everyone at a party is smiling at the person holding the right brand of beer.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We all have a baseline need for stimulation.
Yes, the concept of optimum stimulation level, or OSL.
I think of OSL like a person's spice tolerance for life.
Right.
If you have a high OSL, you have a high spice tolerance. You crave novelty, complexity, risk, and unusual experiences.
You are the person trying exotic new street foods, traveling without an itinerary, and buying cutting-edge, untested gadgets.
And if you have a low OSL,
Think of a low OSL, you just want a reliable, quiet, predictable routine. You want the mild salsa.
you buy the exact same reliable brand of dish soap you've bought for 10 years because it works and you don't want to think about it.
That is a superb analogy, and the correspondence between a consumer's internal OSL and their actual daily lifestyle is critical.
How so?
If someone with a high OSL, a high spice tolerance, is stuck in a boring, repetitive 9-to-5 cubicle job, they experience a massive deficit of stimulation.
Which leads to tension.
That deficit leads to psychological tension. They will actively seek out products, extreme sports, or wildly varied vacations to offer the novelty they need to satisfy that tension.
What happens when you have a need, a tension, and you just can't fulfill the goal? What happens when you desperately want that luxury sports car to fulfill your power need, but you look at your bank account and realize you can't afford it?
Or you want the promotion to fulfill your achievement need, but you get passed over.
Yeah, exactly.
The result is frustration, and human beings hate frustration. When we hit an insurmountable obstacle, we generally go into a psychological fight or flight mode to protect our self-esteem.
Fight or flight for our ego.
Right. Fight means finding a way around the obstacle or substituting the goal. Flight involves employing psychological defense mechanisms to shield our ego from the pain of failure.
What do those defense mechanisms look like in practice?
They look like aggression, lashing out at the car dealership or getting angry at the coworker who got the promotion.
Or rationalization, convincing yourself, you know what, that sports car is actually impractical and people who drive them are jerks anyway. I didn't really want it.
Or projection, blaming your boss's supposed bias for why you didn't get the promotion rather than your own performance.
And here is the genius, or maybe the slightly sinister part. Marketers understand these frustrations intimately. They brilliantly exploit these defense mechanisms by positioning their products as the ultimate solution or the perfect substitute for your unfulfilled goals.
Give an example.
An ad for a mid-tier, affordable sedan might subtly validate your rationalization by saying, for the smart driver, who knows what really matters?
Ah, they are offering their product as the smarter choice, soothing your bruised ego.
Exactly. So knowing a consumer's deep-seated motivations, their OSL, and their defense mechanisms is step one. But knowing all of that is entirely useless if they don't even look at your product on the shelf.
The brain filters out 99% of what we see. So how do marketers hack their way past that filter?
Which brings us to the battleground of human perception. You can have the perfect product for the perfect psychographic segment, addressing their deepest Freudian needs. But if they don't perceive it, it does not exist in their reality.
Perception is a complex cognitive process. It is the process by which an individual selects, organizes, and interprets stimuli into a meaningful and coherent picture of the world.
And it all starts with basic sensation. Sensation is just the immediate raw response of our sensory organs to stimuli in the environment.
Our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin. Marketers are constantly bombarding our five senses.
The research gives some great examples of visual and emotional perception. It mentions how the telecom company Vodafone used the image of a pug dog in their ads.
That pug wasn't just cute. It became a visual symbol of unshakable loyalty, following the user everywhere, just like the network coverage supposedly did.
It mentions Bollywood star Shah Rukh Khan endorsing Pepsodent toothpaste, using a highly recognized, trusted visual icon to immediately transfer trust to a tube of toothpaste.
And it mentions the enduring, highly distinctive taste of Maggi noodles that has built a generational sensory preference in India.
But our senses are constantly bombarded by millions of bits of data every second. If we actually noticed everything, our brains would short circuit. We'd go crazy.
So the brain sets up protective thresholds. The first is the absolute threshold.
The absolute threshold is the minimum level of stimulus intensity at which a person can sense or feel something. It's the exact point where you can differentiate between nothing and something.
It's the faintest sound you can hear in a quiet room, or the dimmest light you can see in the dark.
But there's a catch. If you are exposed to the exact same stimulus constantly, like driving past the same giant yellow billboard on your commute every single day, your absolute threshold for that specific billboard increases.
You adapt to it. It becomes background noise. You literally stop seeing it. Marketers call this sensory adaptation, and it is their worst nightmare.
They fight it by constantly changing their ad campaigns, altering the colors, or using sudden, jarring silence in a radio ad to break the pattern and grab your attention.
This second threshold, and perhaps the most heavily manipulated metric in all of retail, is the differential threshold, also known as the just noticeable difference, or J&D.
This isn't about noticing something versus nothing. This is the minimal variation that can be detected between two similar stimuli.
And this threshold is governed by a fundamental scientific principle called Weber's law. A 19th century German physiologist named Ernst Heinrich Weber discovered that the stronger the initial stimulus, the greater the change needed for your brain to actually notice the difference.
The classic example is weight. If you are holding a 10-pound iron weight in your hand, and I gently place a tiny feather on top of it, your brain does not register the added weight.
The change is below your just noticeable difference.
But if I add a 2-pound weight, suddenly you feel it.
And the practical retail application of Weber's law is everywhere. Think about markdowns during a sale. If a store marks down a $100 winter jacket by $5, nobody cares.
It doesn't trigger excitement because $5 relative to $100 is below the consumer's J&D for a discount.
Retailers know that, generally speaking, markdowns must be at least 20% to actually register as a meaningful, exciting difference to the shopper's brain.
And it works in reverse too, which is where it gets sneaky. Think about shrinkflation.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
If a food company is facing rising ingredient costs and needs to shrink the size of their candy bar to save money, they will reduce the physical size of the bar by an amount that is mathematically calculated to be just below your just noticeable difference.
They might shave off a quarter of an ounce. They
Okay.
know that your visual and tactile perception won't subconsciously notice you're getting less product, but their profit margins go up.
Exactly. They're playing right on the edge of your sensory limits. Which brings us to a highly controversial, almost mythical area of perception, subliminal perception.
This is the idea that people can be stimulated below their level of conscious awareness. The stimulus is too weak, or flashed too briefly, to be consciously seen or heard, but it is theoretically perceived by the subconscious receptor cells.
The research dives into the dark arts of subliminal techniques. First, you have embedding.
This is hiding small shapes, often sexual in nature, in print ads using airbrushing or high-speed photography. Like supposedly hiding the word sex in the ice cubes of a liquor ad to make you subconsciously aroused and thirsty.
Then there are subliminal auditory messages, played quietly beneath recognized elevator music, telling you to be confident, or to lose weight, or to buy a product.
There's also a rich vein of consumer folklore here. Think about the panic in the 1980s over Led Zeppelin's song Stairway to Heaven, allegedly containing the backward audio message, so here's to my sweet Satan.
And then there's low-level threshold messaging, playing faint audio messages in department stores that quietly repeat, "I am honest, I won't steal," beneath the music, designed specifically to stop shoplifting.
And interestingly, that low-level shoplifting audio actually registered a measurable decrease in theft in a test of 1,000 stores, though the researchers admit it probably only deters impulsive amateurs, not professional thieves.
Okay, I have to stop right here and push back hard.
Mm.
Does any of this subliminal stuff actually work? I mean, hiding words in ice cubes.
Well, I mean,
Or what about that famous 1950s drive-in movie theater study? The one where they supposedly flashed the words, "eat popcorn and drink Coke" on the screen for a fraction of a millisecond so fast no one saw it, and sales at the concession stand skyrocketed. Is that real science, or is that just an urban legend marketers tell themselves to feel powerful?
your skepticism is entirely justified. It is largely a myth.
Really?
Yes, the researchers explicitly point out that the famous 1950s popcorn study lacked any rigorous scientific controls. And crucially, the results were never replicated in any other controlled setting.
So it was fake.
In fact, the researcher who conducted it later admitted to fabricating the data to drum up business for his consulting firm. There is absolutely no hard, peer-reviewed evidence that flashing "buy this car for a millisecond" can hijack your brain and force you to buy it.
So we can relax. Our brains aren't being hacked by ice cubes.
Well, not directly. The text synthesizes this by noting a nuance. While a single subliminal flash won't mind control you, continuous, repeated exposure to subtle, weak stimuli in your periphery does have an incremental effect over time.
Oh, okay.
It won't force you to buy a Coke today like a zombie, but seeing the color red and that specific swooping font repeatedly, day after day, slowly shapes your overall attitude and familiarity without you fully realizing it.
That makes more sense. It's less about Manchurian candidate mind control and more about gently, persistently organizing our reality, which the text covers under the concept of perceptual organization.
Our brains don't just see a chaotic, pixelated mess of colors and shapes. We actively organize stimuli into recognizable patterns using principles from Gestalt psychology.
Yes, Gestalt, a German word roughly meaning pattern or configuration. We use inherent psychological principles to make sense of the world. One is figure and ground.
We naturally perceive a sharp, dominant, well-defined figure against a hazy, receding, continuous background. Advertisers carefully design their print ads and websites, so the product, like the perfume bottle or the car, is the unmistakable figure popping out while the background recedes.
Another principle is grouping. We don't remember a 10-digit phone number as 10 isolated numbers. Our brains automatically group them into chunks of 3 and 4.
Advertisers group products together in ads to imply they belong together. A watch, a sleek pen, and a leather wallet grouped together to imply executive status.
But the most powerful Gestalt principle for marketers is closure. I love closure. Our brains have a deep, almost desperate psychological need for a complete picture. We hate unfinished business.
If an advertiser shows us a circle that is missing a tiny segment, our brain automatically fills in the missing piece to make it a whole circle.
If a TV commercial plays a famous jingle but deliberately cuts off the very last note, our brain will supply that final note internally.
And why do advertisers do this? Because by forcing your brain to do that little bit of cognitive work to close the loop, you actively participate in the ad. You engage with it.
And because you engaged with it to finish the pattern, you actually remember the ad far better than if they had just played the whole song.
It's brilliant.
So, to recap the journey so far, they've found your specific segment, they've tapped into your deep Freudian motivations, and they've hacked your perceptual thresholds to get your attention using Gestalt principles. But getting your attention once isn't enough. If they want you to be a loyal customer, they have to train you.
Exactly. If they apply all of these techniques consistently enough over a long enough timeline, they literally train your brain to respond automatically. Welcome to the world of consumer conditioning and learning.
Learning in the context of consumer behavior isn't about memorizing state capitals. It is the process by which individuals acquire the purchase and consumption knowledge and experience that they apply to future behavior.
And the psychological framework identifies 4 absolute non-negotiable requirements for learning to occur: motivation, cues, response, and reinforcement.
We've already discussed motivation. It's the inner drive, the tension.
Cues are the stimuli that give specific direction to those motives. If your motive is hunger, the cue is the bright neon sign of a restaurant, the smell of the fries, the price on the window.
Response is how the individual reacts to the cue. You pull the car over and order.
And reinforcement is the critical final step. It is what increases the likelihood that a specific response will happen again in the future.
If you buy a new brand of shampoo, which is your response to the cue of an ad, and your hair looks absolutely amazing and smells great, which is the reinforcement, you have just learned to buy that shampoo again. The loop is closed.
To explain the mechanics of how this happens, we have to look at the 2 massive foundational pillars of behavioral learning theories: classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning.
Let's start with classical conditioning. When I hear that, I immediately think of Ivan Pavlov and his dogs. Ringing the bell.
Exactly. Pavlov, a Russian physiologist, famously paired the sound of a bell with the presentation of meat powder to a dog. Now, the meat naturally caused the dog to salivate.
Salivation is an automatic, unconditioned biological response to an unconditioned stimulus, the meat. The dog didn't have to learn to drool.
But over time, by consistently ringing the bell right before presenting the meat, the dog's brain learned to associate the 2 events. Eventually, Pavlov could just ring the bell, present no meat, and the dog would still salivate.
The bell had become a conditioned stimulus, causing a conditioned response.
And marketers use this exact biological mechanism all the time. Think about the classic Microsoft Windows startup chime from the 90s.
Oh, that sound is the bell. Microsoft paired that specific pleasant chime with the experience of using their technology, getting work done, or playing a game.
Now, just hearing that chime out of context creates an immediate, conditioned, emotional expectation of technological capability. Or think about how jingles work. You hear 2 notes of a fast food jingle and you suddenly picture a burger.
But classical conditioning requires repetition. The textbook discusses a fascinating concept called the 3-hit theory of advertising. The idea is that an optimal number of exposures to an advertisement is exactly 3.
Why 3?
Because of the cognitive load on the brain. The first hit makes you aware of the product. It pierces your absolute threshold. What is this?
The second hit allows you to process its relevance. Oh, it's a new car, and it looks like it has good gas mileage.
And the third hit serves as a reminder of its benefits, cementing the association. Anything more than 3 in a short period risks advertising wear out, where the consumer gets annoyed, their threshold adapts, and they tune it out completely.
Classical conditioning also relies heavily on a phenomenon called stimulus generalization. This is when consumers confuse similar stimuli or automatically extend their learned responses from one original product to a new, similar product.
Like when you are walking down the cereal aisle and you see a generic store brand cereal packaged in a box that uses the exact same shade of yellow, the exact same font, and a very similar cartoon mascot as the famous expensive name brand cereal.
The store brand is deliberately trying to confuse your quick associative brain. They are hoping you will generalize the positive feelings and perceived quality of the famous brand onto their cheaper imitation.
But it's not just used by knockoffs, it's used legitimately by massive respected brands. Family branding is a perfect example. Walmart spent decades building a strong reputation for brands you trust at low prices.
Eventually, the name Walmart itself became a conditioned stimulus for trust and value. This allowed them to put their own name on store brand products. Walmart brand paper towels, Walmart brand vitamins.
And have people buy them immediately with confidence, generalizing their trust of the store onto the new product.
The research also points out licensing as a form of stimulus generalization. The Vatican Library literally licenses its name to external manufacturers to put on luxury luggage and bed linens.
It sounds bizarre, but they are hoping the consumer will generalize the prestige, history, and perceived immaculate quality of the Vatican onto a suitcase.
But then you have the exact opposite principle, which is equally important: Stimulus discrimination.
This is the cornerstone of brand positioning. You don't want to blend in. You want the consumer to distinguish your specific stimulus from a sea of similar stimuli.
You want them to look at a wall of smartphones and know that your smartphone with the picture of the apple on it is inherently different, superior, and distinct from every other rectangle of glass on the market.
So that is classical conditioning, passive association of stimuli. But the second pillar of learning is instrumental conditioning, also known as operant conditioning. And this brings us to the psychologist B.F. Skinner.
While Pavlov's dogs were passively strapped in a harness, drooling at a bell, Skinner's animals, rats, and pigeons were active. They were moving around in a box.
Instrumental conditioning views learning as a trial and error process. Habits are formed because specific voluntary behaviors result in rewards. You are a rat in a box. You randomly press a lever, a pellet of food drops out.
You perform a behavior, you receive positive reinforcement, you learn to press the lever whenever you are hungry.
And human beings are no different. Retail loyalty programs, frequent flyer miles, coffee shop punch cards, they are essentially just elaborately decorated Skinner boxes for humans. We are the rats pressing the lever.
It's so true. Every time we swipe our loyalty card at the grocery store, we get a little digital point or a tiny discount. It is a literal pellet of positive reinforcement.
And just like Skinner found with his animals, marketers use different reinforcement schedules to keep us pressing the lever. You have continuous reinforcement, where you get a reward every single time you buy a coffee.
But continuous reinforcement can get boring. So marketers use variable ratio reinforcement. This is the slot machine model.
You pull the lever, or you buy a scratch-off ticket, or you open a pack of trading cards, and you don't know when or if the massive reward is coming.
You might get nothing, or you might hit the jackpot. Skinner proved that variable ratio reinforcement makes a behavior incredibly addictive and incredibly hard to extinguish.
Marketers also use a technique called shaping. This is rewarding intermediate behaviors that must occur before the final desired behavior.
Think about a car dealership offering you a free hot dog and a cup of coffee just for walking onto the lot on a Saturday. Their ultimate goal is to sell you a $40,000 car, but they know you have to be on the lot first.
So they reinforce the initial intermediate step of just showing up.
The research also brings up a fascinating strategic dilemma for marketers: massed versus distributed learning. When should they spend their advertising budget? Should they blitz you with ads or spread them out?
If a company is launching a massive brand new product, like a summer blockbuster movie, or trying to drown out a competitor's launch, they use massed learning. They bunch all the ads up at once, dominating every billboard, TV channel, and social feed to create immediate, overwhelming awareness.
But massed learning is easily forgotten once the blitz ends. If the goal is long-term brand loyalty and deep habit formation, like selling a daily face wash, distributed learning is much better.
Spacing the ads out slowly over a period of months makes the learning far more ingrained and resistant to extinction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the researchers point out that human beings have a superpower that Skinner's rats didn't have. We don't even have to experience the trial and error ourselves to learn. We use observational or vicarious learning.
We are highly evolved social creatures. Trial and error takes time and involves risk, so we bypass it.
We don't need to be rewarded directly. We just watch a respected celebrity in a commercial, use a specific brand of watch, and we see people admiring them.
Or we watch our cool older sibling use a specific slang word and get laughs. We watch the reinforcement happen to others, and we simply mimic their consumption. We learn by watching the rewards of others.
So all of this, the psychographic profiling, the mapping of your deep motives, the sensory hacking of your thresholds, the Pavlovian bells, and the Skinner box loyalty points, it all culminates in our final area of exploration.
Attitudes and post-purchase dissonance. All this psychological training leads to a relatively permanent state of mind, your attitude towards brand. But what actually happens in your brain when you finally buy the product, take it home, and the hype fades?
To understand the aftermath, we first have to understand what an attitude is made of. It's not just a vague feeling. The psychological framework uses the tri-component attitude model, which states that every attitude is built from 3 distinct parts:
Cognitive, affective, and conative. Let's use an example from the source of a deeply beloved brand in India, Amul butter.
The cognitive component is what you logically think or believe based on data and knowledge. Your cognitive attitude might be, Amul butter is reasonably priced, it is easily available at my local store, and the packaging keeps it fresh. It's pure information.
The affective component is what you feel. It's purely emotional. Your affective attitude might be, I have incredibly fond childhood memories of eating warm toast with Amul butter at my grandmother's house on Sunday mornings. Seeing the Amul Girl mascot makes me feel nostalgic, warm, and happy.
And the conative component is what you intend to do. It is the behavioral intention to act. When I go to the grocery store tomorrow, I intend to reach out and physically put Amul butter in my cart.
If all three of these components, think, feel, do, are aligned, the marketer has won the ultimate victory. You have a solid, positive attitude.
But attitudes aren't just floating out there in the ether. They serve very specific psychological functions for the consumer. Psychologist Daniel Katz developed the functional theory of attitudes. He argued that we don't just hold attitudes randomly.
We hold them because they do a job for us. They protect us or help us navigate the world.
Katz lists 5 of these functions, and they explain so much about human behavior. First is the utilitarian function. We hold an attitude simply because a product rewards us or helps us avoid pain.
You love a specific brand of pain reliever because it cures your headache fast. Simple utility.
Second is the social adjustive function. We hold an attitude to fit in with a desired social group. You might not actually care about the physical quality of a $300 pair of sneakers, but you hold a positive attitude toward them because wearing them gains you status and acceptance among your peers. The attitude is a social passport.
Third is the value expressive function. We hold an attitude to broadcast our core identity to the world. Think about a bumper sticker on a car for a political cause, or buying explicitly eco-friendly, fair trade coffee.
The coffee might taste the same as the cheap stuff, but your attitude toward the brand allows you to express your deeply held value of environmentalism. You're telling the tribe who you are.
Fourth is the ego defensive function. This one is fascinating. We hold an attitude to protect our fragile self-esteem from harsh internal truths.
Imagine someone who secretly feels deeply insecure about their lack of culinary skills. They might develop a fiercely positive attitude toward and purchase a ridiculously expensive, incredibly complex, professional-grade espresso machine.
Their stated attitude is, I only drink the highest quality coffee, but the internal function of that attitude is ego defensive. It protects them from the harsh truth that they don't know how to make coffee. The impressive machine does the heavy lifting for their self-esteem.
And finally, the knowledge function. The world is chaotic and full of millions of products. We hold attitudes just to organize that chaos into understandable, safe categories.
I believe Apple makes good electronics. Holding that attitude saves you from having to research every single computer on the market. It organizes your world.
But the critical moment for any marketer, and the most vulnerable moment for any consumer, is what happens after you swipe the card and take the product home. This is where Leon Festinger's groundbreaking theory of cognitive dissonance comes into play.
Buyer's remorse.
Exactly. Cognitive dissonance is the intensely uncomfortable psychological tension we feel when our attitudes and our behaviors are in conflict, or when we have to choose between two highly attractive alternatives.
When you finally buy that expensive car, you leave the lot, and immediately your brain starts thinking about all the money you just spent. Or you start thinking about the features of the other car you didn't choose.
Your brain is in conflict. I am a smart person who saves money, but I just spent $50,000 on a depreciating asset. You experience acute post-purchase dissonance.
And human beings will do almost anything to cure that dissonance. The research references some wild psychological experiments to illustrate how desperate we are to resolve this discomfort. It mentions Aronson's safe sex hypocrisy experiment.
This is a classic study in cognitive gymnastics. Researchers had college students advocate for safe sex practices. They had them stand in front of a camera and record video speeches about the absolute importance of using condoms, knowing these videos would be shown to high school students.
But then, the trap was sprung. The researchers subtly interviewed the students and had them recall and confess to times in their own recent past when they had personally failed to practice safe sex.
This created massive, agonizing cognitive dissonance. Their past behavior completely contradicted their current public attitude of preaching safe sex on video. It made them feel like massive hypocrites. And the brain hates feeling like a hypocrite.
So to resolve that uncomfortable tension, a massive percentage of those students went out and immediately bought condoms. They changed their immediate behavior to align with their stated attitude, desperately trying to cure the dissonance and restore their self-image as responsible people.
The research also brings up the severe embarrassment initiation test. This is mind-blowing. Researchers recruited female college students for a discussion group on the psychology of sex. One group of women had a very mild, easy screening process to get in.
But another set of women were put through an incredibly embarrassing, highly uncomfortable initiation process where they had to read explicit, embarrassing words aloud to a male researcher.
It was awful for them. But here is the twist. When both groups finally joined the actual discussion group, they found out the group was completely fake. The researchers had rigged it to be the most incredibly boring, dull, dry discussion about animal mating habits imaginable.
Now, the women who went through the mild initiation correctly reported that the group was boring. But the women who went through the severe, embarrassing initiation, they reported liking the boring group. They found it fascinating.
Why? Because to admit the group was boring would mean admitting to themselves that they suffered that terrible, agonizing embarrassment for absolutely no reason. They would feel foolish. That creates massive cognitive dissonance.
I am a smart person, but I just degraded myself for a boring club. So to resolve the dissonance, their brains literally altered their reality. Their brains forced them to adopt the attitude that the boring group was actually fascinating. We will literally lie to ourselves to resolve cognitive dissonance.
Which brings us back to how you and I resolve post-purchase dissonance in the marketplace. When we feel buyer's remorse sitting in the driveway in our expensive new car, we try to reduce the conflict.
We might change our attitude. We might minimize the importance of the decision money is just paper anyway.
Or, most commonly, we actively seek out new information that supports and validates our choice, while aggressively ignoring any information that suggests we made a mistake.
So what does this all mean? It means we don't just act based on our attitudes. Sometimes it operates entirely in reverse. The research mentions a concept called self-observation theory.
It's the profound idea that sometimes we don't actually have a strong attitude at all before we buy something. We simply look at our own behavior. We look at what we just put in our shopping cart, and we infer our attitude from that action.
We look at the receipt and say, well, I just spent $200 on high-end running shoes, so I guess I must be the kind of person who is dedicated to fitness. We watch ourselves act and then decide who we are.
This raises an important question for marketers, and it reveals their final trick. Marketers know you are going to experience this agonizing post-purchase regret. They know you're going to be desperately searching for validation to cure your dissonance.
That is exactly why luxury car companies send you beautiful, glossy magazines celebrating the elite lifestyle of the car you already bought.
Wait, they aren't trying to sell you the car again.
No, you already bought it. They're supplying you with the reassuring data you desperately need to resolve your cognitive dissonance. When you look at that glossy magazine, you think, look at these sophisticated people driving my car. I am one of them. I made a brilliant, rational choice.
They are managing your psychology even after they have your money.
It is absolutely brilliant and, honestly, slightly terrifying.
Yeah.
It completely reframes that simple trip to the supermarket we talked about at the beginning. We started this deep dive thinking about a simple straight line from the automatic doors to the milk carton.
But what we've seen is that the very aisle you walk down is laid out to trigger your optimum stimulation level. The fluorescent lighting is calibrated below your absolute threshold for annoyance, but high enough to keep you awake.
The packaging on the milk is using Gestalt principles of closure to lock its logo into your memory. The brand is utilizing Pavlovian classical conditioning to make you feel nostalgic. And when you finally buy it, the post-purchase marketing is designed to soothe your cognitive dissonance.
It is a meticulously designed environment constructed from the ground up using a century of psychological research to understand, anticipate, and guide human behavior at a subconscious level.
Which leaves us with a massive, thought-provoking idea to wrap up this journey. We just talked about the self-observation theory, the idea that we figure out our own personalities by watching our own behavior.
We look at the clothes hanging in our closet, the apps downloaded on our phone, the specific brands of food sitting in our pantry, and we tell ourselves a story about who we are based on what we've consumed.
But if our attitudes, our identities, and our very sense of self are so easily rewritten simply by observing our own heavily manipulated purchasing actions, are we ever truly exercising free will when we shop? Or are we just continuously watching what we buy and reverse engineering our entire sense of self just to resolve the cognitive dissonance of living in a modern consumer world? Are you the author of your shopping list, or is the shopping list the author of you?
That is a profound question to end on. It fundamentally challenges how we perceive our own agency in the marketplace.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into your own mind. We hope we've given you the tools to see the invisible strings the next time you step into a store. Keep questioning the invisible forces around you, keep looking for the why behind the buy, and remember, the next time you walk into that brightly lit supermarket, that seemingly simple maze, you're never just buying milk.